name is Kelly Wallace, and I am the California History Subject Specialist at the Los Angeles Public Library's Central Library. Welcome to the first in a series of conversations with people who engage with Los Angeles history in interesting and unique ways. Today, I'm thrilled to have as my first guest, Elizabeth Ito, creator and executive producer of the Netflix series City of Ghosts. Welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
City of Ghosts is a hybrid documentary-style series about a group of ghost-loving kids who learn about the rich history of Los Angeles through encounters with friendly neighborhood ghosts.
It's definitely a ghost.
If you haven't yet seen the show, what are you waiting for? It is a delightful, charming show, and I am a huge fan. Elizabeth Ito is a veteran of the animation industry and has worked for many different studios on film, TV, and commercial projects. She's an Emmy Award-winning director for the Adventure Time series. She also is award-winning creator of the short Welcome to My Life about her brother. It is the second most viewed cartoon short on the Cartoon Network. I want to talk a little bit about the start, the genesis. How did you come up with the idea for City of Ghosts?
So I was really looking for like a show to watch with my young children, and it had been hard for me to find shows that were kind of not super loud and just with like a lot of cutting and things like that. And so I was trying to make a show, I guess, like for them and also for me, because I tend to like really quiet shows, and I thought that it was possible to make one. And so I kind of focused on City of Ghosts, and I just also love Los Angeles and ghosts.
Speaking of the ghosts, the supernatural element is such a great idea. The Ghost Club is a team of kids that go around seeking ghosts and hearing their stories. And Zelda is sort of the leader of a little bit of the Ghost Club. And she has a quote. She says, "This Ghost Club look for ghosts around the city to tell us their stories." And I was like, oh my God, isn't that a perfect metaphor for historians, for history? That's sort of what we do, is sort of we go around and look for ghosts and tell their stories. So I totally identified with it. But I find that supernatural element is such an interesting way to bring in the history, but make it fun for the kids.
Yeah, I like another sort of, I guess, catalyst for creating the show was just, my drives to work, or, I mean, we drive a lot in LA, so I would notice kind of as you're driving by a bunch of buildings, sometimes you would see one where you could tell it was older or just it didn't fit the current style of whatever that block was. And I think I just thought, I'm always really fascinated to find out, like, why is that building there? Like, why does it look like that? Like all these things like that. So it does have a lot of crossover with just what historians and I guess like journalists do in general.
History happens everywhere, or every building has a story, or just walking down the street, what happened there. That street light has a story by what style it is, and when you said that you want to watch it too, because that's what another great thing about this show is that it's entertaining for adults too, as much as for kids. So another thing I wanted to ask you about was it's a mashup of sort of a documentary and an animated show, but it's also sort of a mashup in the styles. There's the characters who are, I don't know what you call that, 3D animated stuff. And then there's the backgrounds, which are, as I understand it, from photos, then slightly. Do you want to talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, so kind of going off of how we did my short for Cartoon Network, I have been really interested in combining like photography of different spaces with characters that I draw or I design. So when I wanted to make City of Ghosts, I kind of just thought, Well, I want it to feel grounded. I want it to feel like this is really something that's happening, but I also want it to feel kind of whimsical and have like a certain style to the look of the characters. And I think that's really what drove it. But then my husband runs an animation studio, and so we worked with his small studio to come up with this look for the show that kind of incorporated the photographic elements in the background, but then kind of utilized what his studio is really good at, which is sort of plussing whatever they're given to something that basically just hasn't really been done or seen before. And I think just the collaboration between his studio, Quasi, our photographer, and me, I guess, it all kind of ended up in this mashup of, I think, all the things that we're each really strong at.
Yeah, because I'm not sure I would have enjoyed necessarily a realistic background, but it is realistic, but yet it isn't. Anyway, but you can recognize the corners, the metro stops, the train yards, or whatever. Anyway, it's delightful.
I mean, one of the interesting things some people have pointed out too is that, and something that Chromosphere and my husband Kevin are really keen at noticing is like the lighting here too. Like there's a really specific light to LA and all of the spaces around LA. So I felt really glad that we captured that, like the quality of light that we get here.
Definitely. I wanted to ask you also about Los Angeles, because I read somewhere that you also, for people who criticize Los Angeles or think of it as only big urban sprawl, and you sort of kind of wanted to show another picture of Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get the criticism too. Like I understand why people feel that way. There are times where where I get frustrated with, like, you know, the drives and how long it takes. But beyond that, LA is just there's so many facets to it that it's hard for me to take when somebody boils it down to like it's Hollywood or it's fake or any of these kinds of things, because there is such like a deep history that you're totally ignoring if you only focus on basically like the Hollywood of it. So I really wanted to show the things about Los Angeles that I think are worth exploring and worth knowing more about.
It's not just a polyglot or, you know, or like an urban sprawl, but if there's very rich and distinct neighborhoods, you know, all sort of making up this puzzle that is Los Angeles. So I want to ask another question about the supernatural. I read in an interview once that you had a ghost sighting of when you were a child.
Yeah, when I was about like 5 or 6, I'm trying to remember when it was, because my great-grandmother had passed away, and she was born on a leap year, and it happened to be like the evening of a leap year after she had died, and I was always scared to get up to go to the bathroom when I was a kid, and I went to the bathroom, and in the hallway I thought I saw this foggy shape, and so I yelled out to my parents, like, somebody come help me, there's a ghost out here. And somebody said, go back to bed, it'll be fine. So I think I flushed the toilet and I ran as fast as I could back to my room. And the next morning my dad said, oh, so you saw a ghost in the hallway? I saw it too, and I didn't want to come out because I was scared. So, I mean, I was glad that he shared that experience with me, though, and I think it was really, I don't know, it's really interesting, because even recently my mom's best friend basically said, yeah, like, that's so great. Bachan is looking over Elizabeth from from the great beyond, so it's nice to hear that she's just taken care of.
That's very nice. I always wish I'd seen a ghost, but I never have. Central Library plays a big role in the show. The Ghost Club comes to Central Library to meet, and often under a table. But so was the library important to you growing up? I feel a love of the library coming through in the show.
Yeah, it was a big place for me, both like the local branch. I think it was the Baldwin Hills branch maybe that we were really close to. But I was a really avid reader. I think it was one of the things I was best at besides drawing was reading. And I remember one of the first books that really got me hooked was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I remember reading that really fast and then just wanting more. And I think like the library was such an awesome place because you could check out, I mean, as long as somebody else hadn't checked out all the copies of it, you could check out books that you could read anything, and you didn't have to have money unless your book was overdue. But it was really great. And beyond that, like the Central Library specifically, I remember coming here for different talks that were given. Like my dad was a big Ray Bradbury fan, and it's really funny that we're in the rare books room because we came to this one talk that he gave, and my dad was so excited because he was also a really avid reader. I mean, now he is, and even as a kid. And he brought his copy of Dark Carnival that he had acquired many years before. I think he said he had repeatedly called this bookseller to find out if they had a copy of it in, to the point where the bookseller was like, "Look, if we get a copy, I'll call you. Just give me your number and I'll call you." And he was so excited to get it signed. So I got to meet Ray Bradbury. We went to a couple of talks from political cartoonists because my grandparents and my parents knew that I was into drawing. So yeah, it's been really important and a really just amazing place to be for a kid.
Well, and Zelda has lots of great lines in the show. She has another one where she's introducing at the library, and she says, "It's really big, like a castle for books." And I thought that was just fantastic. Now, you talk about drawing as a kid. So, I mean, you've been drawing since you were young. So that's it. That kind of you.
Yeah, drawing was sort of my the way that I got out anything that I was feeling or thinking about. I know some people learn how to draw from copying things, or they really like a cartoon or a comic book that they've read, so they'll try to draw like that. For me, it was really just trying to draw from my imagination and from literally, my feelings. Like if I was having a bad day, I would draw a picture about it, or if I was having a happy day, I would draw a picture about that too. So I think it was just always the thing that I did to not in both good and bad ways, to cope with everything.
It's interesting. I had one of my favorite classes in college was visual thinking. It was actually a mechanical engineering class, sort of for product design. But one of you had to keep a visual journal or pad, and you were supposed to draw like that. You were supposed to draw anything, or how to solve your, whatever. I can't write my paper. Oh, you're supposed to draw a picture about it or something. So anyway, that's great. Oh yes, food. Food is a big element in the show also. And I think that's very interesting because food really is a way that cultures and neighborhoods intersect. But it's also can be sort of a divisive thing. And I think you experience what many people experience when they go to school, and you bring your lunch of foods that your mother prepared for you that aren't peanut butter and jelly or tuna fish, and other kids, make fun. What's that? It smells, whatever. And so then you can feel very isolated. And I believe you said that you learned to answer, what's your favorite food? Pizza, because it was easier than
soba. Yeah. That. It was both stuff when you have to fill out a paper or something where they ask you your favorite things. I think from the first times I ate it, soba was a really good food. Like, I just liked it. It's really simple, and like, to be honest, it's like a lot simpler in taste than something like pizza to me. But it was uncomfortable to have to explain to other kids like what that was, and even just that it's a cold noodle. Like, I think when I was little, it just, there weren't very many people that ate cold noodles unless they were like me or whatnot. So there was that, and then also just sort of, lunchtime. I remember there was one lunch where I brought like a rice ball, and somebody, I don't even think, like, now looking back, it's not even that mean of a thing to say. They were just like, oh, what are you eating, a snowball? And I was just sort of like, no. And then I just thought, I don't want to show anybody when I eat this anymore if they're going to call it a snowball. It's just literally a ball of rice with a little pickle in the middle. So, like, not sure what their problem is. But yeah, I mean, I think when stuff like that started getting more popular too, it was like a weird feeling of like, well, now it's popular. I wish that had happened a little earlier so I wouldn't have to explain any of this to anybody.
Yes, in Los Angeles, I'm sure lots of cities, but Los Angeles in particular, I think might be the Jonathan Gould effect, but he was such a champion of, ethnic cuisines and neighborhoods, and would drive to neighborhoods. But people really seek out, these experiences now. But also the settings are also important. The cafes, have cafes in several of the episodes, and they're sort of community spots and that sort of bonhomie that you get in a neighborhood cafe or restaurant, which is really nice. You use real people in the show. Now, so let's talk about the process a little bit, because you interview them to sort of come up with the storylines, and then they also voice the characters, and that just adds such a level of realness or depth or authenticity. So how'd you get that idea? And how did you find the people?
Well, the first part, getting that idea, was just, I was heavily influenced by This American Life, and by this short that Nick Park made called Creature Comforts, where kind of like similar to what I do and what happens in This American Life is just he went and he interviewed real people at the zoo and then used the audio from that to turn them into zoo animals that were talking about being in the zoo. And I thought that was really, really funny. I still think it's really funny. I was going to say as a kid, but I've continued to think that was funny through time. And then with This American Life, I think it was just thinking a lot about how some of the stories that they tell, part of what's so good about it and so original is just that you're getting people to tell their own story to you in their own voice. And I've noticed just, I mean, from from my experience of working in animation, that the minute that you kind of take somebody else's words and you try to get an actor to read those words and sound as authentic as the person that said them, for me it just falls flat. Like, I mean, even if you take something like transitioning from something that felt real, like the British office, to sort of like the American office, there's a slight difference, I think, that people can get from the method that you use or the way that you do things, or even like sometimes the kinds of actors that you're using. So I think for me it was really important for things to sound authentic, and also just for me, like, the humor of dialogue comes from the realness of it, like the awkwardness that people can have, or sometimes when they get tripped up on words, or just sometimes the way that they'll phrase something is not a way that you've ever heard it phrased before, or just even the cadence of that they say it. So I really wanted to capture that about everything that we talked about LA and stories in general.
Hey, there's a
Oh, sorry. The second part of your question too. I thought about that a lot since you sent the questions. I read it and I thought, how did I find those people, and what about that was important? And I think for me, like, I'm pretty shy, like, and I don't necessarily like to approach strangers, but I'm also really interested in the stories of strangers. So for me, it was really important to find a documentary producer who knew how to do that, like how to navigate contacting people and sort of presenting them with what your project was, and explaining stuff to them, where it removed that barrier for me of like of having to do everything yourself. So I think like it was a nice thing to have other people on the show in general that do things that you might not be so good at yourself.
So that's interesting. So you had your co-producer who was a documentarian, so she had experience in that. That's interesting because that comes through. But another facet of the show is that it's, and I read this in someone else's review, but that the stories are true, but yet they're not true. I mean, that's what's it. There's fact, there's real history there, but yet you've got the ghosts and the kids, and so they're true and they're not true. And so it's a very fascinating element, a way to watch history of LA. Sense of place, the neighborhoods, and you would get that through the photographs and the background and also the stories. But I just think it's one of my sort of obsessions as the California history subject specialist, is sort of creating the sense of place in Los Angeles where there's so many different things. And I love looking at the neighborhoods. And researching neighborhoods is one of the most popular questions that we get in the library. So I pulled some of the historic materials that we have that will tie in with some of the episodes. I'm going to bring up this map first. Episode 4, I believe, deals with the Tongva native peoples. And I love the intro, because each episode does begin with a map. And Zelda says it in this episode. We begin each episode with a map. And because the concept of maps is very interesting. The map doesn't have to be absolutely geographically correct. It can be a pictorial map. It can be a series of dots. It can be a map of, where my dog likes to stop on his walks, or my memory of my neighborhood. But in this one, she's like, well, here's the map and then the names we know of the places. But did these places have other names before? And so I just love that, because so many street names, neighborhoods, things like that are all sort of related to the history. So this is a map of the Gabrielina Indians, which was the name assigned to them by the Spanish because of the San Gabriel mission. So it has the names of the Tongva villages around. And so it is interesting that a map of the area before the Spanish came. And it's interesting that some of the Tongva names carried on the NG, so like Cahuenga, Topanga, Tahunga, Cucamonga, so they're still in our on current maps.
Yeah, it was really exciting to learn that from Mercedes and Megan. I remember when we first talked to them, they were two of the people featured in the 4th episode. They told us that same thing, and I think I just felt like, why didn't I know this before this moment when they were telling me this? And now sometimes when I hear names that I've been familiar with, like since living here for forever, I just think, wow, that's incredible. Like it's really incredible to know that now and to hear it.
The episode with the Bob Baker Marionette Theater, I mean, oh my gosh. Because growing up here, I'm of a certain age. The Bob Baker Marionette Theater came to my elementary school, Marengo School, and put on a show. So it's a big part of my childhood.
Too.
Oh my gosh. And so we have a vertical file. We have a California index at the library, and it's an index that's been put together by librarians at LAPL for decades, and it includes citations. It points people the right direction to books, maps, photos, articles, and magazines about topics that are important to Los Angeles, Southern California, California history. It also includes old-fashioned vertical files where we keep clippings. And these are just great. So we have one on the Bob Baker
That's so
Marionette
cool.
Theater. And in the show, you're talking about how they had to move. And so we have the stories from here where they found their new home in Highland Park. And
Man,
the
if
neighbors gathered for the final farewell.
if my grandparents were still alive, they probably would have sent me clippings like that.
Exactly. And then one of the real people that you use in the show is Atomic Nancy from
Yeah.
the Atomic Cafe.
She's so awesome.
I mean, she's so radical. So we have a debt, because we are one of the few libraries that has a complete collection of the LA Weekly. And so part of it has been digitized and is available on the Los Angeles Public Library website under the list of databases. And so if you go to the dash, you can find some digitized articles about the Atomic Cafe. And then this one in 1983 was Best New Wave Jukebox, because she talks about in the show about filling in the jukebox with.
Yeah, the jukebox was so cool to find out about, because like it wasn't just I think there was a epic new wave collection in there for sure, but also a lot of stuff that I've never heard of people putting in a jukebox, like Inca music. It's this Japanese way of singing that's sort of showy. I don't really know how to describe it other than that. It's spelled ENKA, I think. So if people want to look it up, it's like I don't know if you call it traditional, because I don't know how long it's been around for. But she said she used to have records of that and like Hawaiian music from like the 50s, I think. So there was a lot of variety in there that was really exciting to hear about.
And then from our photo collection, there's a picture of the Atomic Cafe.
Oh, how cool.
I know, it's very great.
And I remember her saying, I think she tells this story other places too, but she said, you know, Andy Warhol was standing outside and all of his pictures were from the outside, because I think she told him that there was a line and he needed to get in it if he wanted to go inside. And he got scared of her, so I was just thinking, that's so epic. He scared Andy Warhol.
I also have Leimert Park, file on Leimert Park, and found this clipping in there. And it actually talks about Barbara Morrison, who is another real person in the show.
Man, she's another phenom.
Exactly. And so she's a well-known jazz singer and opened a museum, the California Jazz and Blues Museum. And another wonderful resource at the library, we have Freegal, where you can download music and you can put in Barbara Morrison and you will find some Barbara Morrison music for anybody who's unfamiliar and wants to listen to her.
That's so rad.
Exactly. So it's interesting. And there's also clippings in here about the park. Earlier, here's something about the Vision Theater, because that's a big image in that episode.
It's our opening title shot.
Yes, exactly. Where they had the drums, where they used to play the drums, and so then they talk about that they redid the park, but they don't mention that they don't have drum circles there anymore.
Yeah, it was.
They talk about putting the fence around it.
It was a whole thing. I think they were really trying to control, like, just the activity in the park, and so they fenced it off. And people had mixed feelings about it, about fencing it off. But I think it was true at an earlier time that the drum circles moved from being in the park to. They had to move out of there because it was fenced off.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like that now, though.
I know, but I was wondering if they've now, because here's an old picture from this is from 2008, drum circle. Yeah, because it seems to be undergoing a little bit of a renaissance.
One of my favorite experiences with Barbara Morrison was that we we got to record with her for her to sing a little bit in the show, and I mean, I don't know how to describe it other than it was so exciting for everybody to have her there and to have her just sort of like riff off of what we all had done together. Like our composer Mike Andrews did some really great music, and then JMD did really great drumming, and then through JMD we were just like, do you think we could get Barbara to come in and like sing a little bit, because that would really sort of complete what we're doing here, and we got her to come in, and it was the best. She's the best. She's was really great.
It's an amazing story. And lastly, we have a big file on Boyle Heights, because here we have an article on the restaurant that was sort of the basis or heart of the story of the episode. Otomi restaurant, originally called Otomi-san. And so that was, and you have the chef.
We have Janet the ghost. Little napkin right there. She's the daughter of the current owner of Otomi-san, so we got her to voice Janet the ghost.
That's amazing.
It's really cool seeing this picture too, because honestly, like the way that I even knew about Otomi-san wasn't because I just knew about it. Like my good friend Hugo, who also grew up in LA for his whole life, he used to live around there, and he told me, like, have you ever been to this? And this was before City of Ghosts, like probably, I don't know, like a decade before at least. He just said, have you ever been to this Japanese restaurant that's like on First Street? And I was like, First Street, like in Little Tokyo? And he's like, no, it's like over the bridge. There's a little Japanese restaurant that has, like, I really like sukiyaki, and I think he had sukiyaki there or something, and I was like, oh, really? I've never heard of that. And then, so when we started doing City of Ghosts, I thought, well, now I want to go find out about that restaurant, because, like, my good friend told me about it, and so it really was just, like, a very LA feeling thing.
Well, Boyle Heights is such a quintessential LA neighborhood in a way, and that so many different cultures and ethnicities have lived there, and it's had such an ebb and flow of whatever the majority population is. And then there's this Boyle Heights community report from 1974, but it talks a little bit about the Japanese, persons of Japanese descent, and how they Japanese population in Boyle Heights peaked in 1940, and then, of course, was reduced drastically by the internment camps.
Yeah, this other article with this picture, this cemetery is where grandparents from both sides of my family and also other relatives are at Evergreen Cemetery.
Yeah, because that was one of the only cemeteries where they could be buried.
Yeah, so it's really, I don't know. And then when my grandfather on my mom's side, in his sort of last years, he lived at Hollenbeck. There's like a care facility called Hollenbeck over there that's very, like, it feels very full of history. Whenever we would go visit him, I was like, this feels very old, and it's called Hollenbeck, so.
Well, this Japanese hospital is also in Boyle Heights and has a lot of history, and was created because Japanese couldn't get medical services at a lot of hospitals. And they're just now sort of honoring it. In 2020, they honored it with a historic cultural monument. So it's nice that there's an effort to preserve some of the Japanese history in Boyle Heights. That's another element.
That's cool. I think that was right next door to Hollenbeck. Cato. It used to be called Cato, but it's something different now.
Well, because when you said Hollenbeck, I almost thought it said Cato, because that's a whole battle. Aren't they trying to close it?
Yeah. I think they got purchased by, I don't know, some conglomerate, and they had really I don't know. It was pretty bad during everything that's just happened. So
That's another typical LA story development.
yeah.
Well, that's the formal part of the interview. Now I just want to ask you a couple of fun questions, if you don't mind. Do you have a favorite meal in Los Angeles? Can be a food, restaurant.
I thought a while about this one too. Like, I'm going to name a couple things that don't exist anymore. Like, but there, there used to be this restaurant in Santa Monica called Terried. I think it was like Terried Sake House, and they had this, like, it was called like fried baby octopus or grilled baby octopus, and I loved eating that with like a beer. That was, and they're not there anymore, so I missed that. I looked it up to figure. I had forgotten what the name of it was because it'd been so long since I'd been there. So I really missed that. I wish I could go back in time and have that again. And the other one was Beverly Soon Tofu. Like, I was really bummed that they closed because of pandemic and everything. But that was a place that I loved to eat, and we actually had our last, like after our last shoot, that was like the last restaurant we went to celebrate that we had finished this shoot for City of Ghosts. And I guess I'm glad we went, but I'm sad that they had to close.
I know, it's sad. Losing a lot of restaurants because of the pandemic. And then, where would you take an out-of-town guest in Los Angeles?
I think it depends on what that particular guest is into, because there's some stuff where I could go really deep and take them to some place that's strange or that sort of only exists in LA. One of the places I used to like to take people was the Museum of Jurassic Technology in Culver City. I hope they're still there. And other than that, like I like the standard things. Like I like LACMA. I like lately I've been spending a lot of time at Descanso Gardens, and I don't know if that counts as LA.
Oh yes, the Broad.
Yeah, or like Huntington Gardens again. That's kind of in Pasadena, but I like a lot of the outdoor things you can do here. I love a lot of different places in Griffith Park because there's just so much variety. There's this little space called Ferndale where there's a lot of ferns and turtles and things, so I really like going there because I like turtles.
It's interesting you mentioned that. During the pandemic I had a research question, and it was a gentleman, he wanted to write an article for a New Zealand magazine, I believe, because there were two New Zealand brothers that were like they weren't the designers, they were like the landscape construction people for Ferndale. And we had the name, but we could not find out anything. There was nothing on them anywhere. So anyway, it was very fascinating. So I learned more about Ferndale. Lastly, since you're a big reader, what are you reading now?
I mean, I've been reading a lot of random articles. Like I just read an article about these like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like tree historians. Like they've been collecting lumber from buildings that they demolished in New York, like old buildings, and figuring out where the trees were cut down and how old they are, and just a lot of scientific information that's really fascinating to me. So I tend to read a lot of really specific things like that. Book-wise, I think the last book I read was Minor Feelings by Kathy Park Hong, and the one that I started to read but started to get too mad, not because it was a bad book, but because I really related to everything, was Mediocre.
I was going to say, didn't you write another book that was really popular?
Yeah, so
I'm
the other one
blanking out,
was So You Want to Talk About Race. But yeah, I started to read Mediocre, and just even the foreword, I was like, oh, this is too good, but also making me infuriated at this particular moment.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for being here today and answering all our questions. And again, I just can't recommend City of Ghosts highly enough. It really is a celebration of Los Angeles. So congratulations. It's a great show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be a part of this.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I don't know, we should have a better ending probably, but